Chapter 16. Turning down May had finally made the breakup permanent in Brett's mind. He had gotten the opportunity to make the choice of whether or not they should be together, and he said no. The answer could have been different if she had told him how she felt that other day, or any other minute, but in that moment in Wellsco, Brett had made the decision, and he was able to live with that reality. May also understood the finality of Brett's decision. It was an odd moment of growth for her. In the past, if this had happened, she would have set some lofty goal and left St. Farr in return of something better. Now, she had just resigned herself to being a small-town accountant who had to take care of her parents, and that was okay with her. Even though St. Farr had only been her home for a handful of years, and those years hadn't even been consecutive, it felt like this was where she belonged. Brett and May continued living their lives in the small town. When you live in a small town like St. Farr, you tend to see all of its citizens in passing on a fairly regular basis. Heartbreak and history were not enough to shield them from that reality. They would occasionally see each other in town, in the town square, shopping at Pink Spools, and of course at community events. When they did happen to see one another, neither would wave. Neither of them would smile. They would simply give each other a look of sorrowful acknowledgement and go about their business. Months passed since Brett had denied May in the small general store, and neither one had begun to heal. On an early lunch one afternoon, Brett pulled open the front door of Harvey's to find May sitting alone at their favorite table. Typically, Brett would turn around and leave, coming upon May in public, but now it all seemed so silly. There was no reason for him to change his lunch plans just because she was already there eating. It was the only restaurant in town, and May went to great lengths to never go to Wellsco, so where else would she be around lunchtime? "The couple is back," the old-timers called from their comfortable spots, sitting shoulder to shoulder at the bar of the cafe. Brett ignored the comment and pushed between the two of the old men. "Harvey, one patty melt, please." "Fries?" "Sure, that'd be great." Brett waited in silence while the old-timers continued sending verbal jabs his way. They didn't hurt. In fact, they didn't even register. He was living in a separate reality, working hard to isolate himself from thoughts of May. After a few minutes, Harvey held a white paper bag out across the counter. "Here you go." "Thanks, Harvey," Brett said, taking the bag and making his way to the front door. He crossed the small cafe dining area in a few quick leaping steps and grabbed the door handle when he heard May's familiar voice quietly say his name. "Brett?" The muscles in his arm ceased firing. He turned his head toward May and raised his eyebrows, asking why she had broken their unwritten truce. "Yeah? Will you please eat with me?" Initially, Brett couldn't believe she would ask that. Speaking over the established verbal border between them was one thing, but asking him to give her time was another. Then, almost as quickly, he once again reminded himself how silly it would be to deny her request. They both lived in St. Farr, and they both saw each other regularly. They were best friends for years. Every one of the best moments in his life had included her. One short civil lunch couldn't hurt. He moved to their favorite table, resuming his familiar slouching posture in his favorite chair. May smiled. For a few minutes, they ate in silence. Brett started to wonder why she'd even asked him to join her if she wasn't going to speak. Sitting quietly was too much for him to bear, and his polite Texas upbringing pushed its way out from within his gut. "So what have you been up to?" May smiled excitedly and began telling him all about her adventures around St. Farr, how her father was sick but in recovery, how she had started doing taxes for most of the businesses in town and built that into a small business of her own, how she had started baking and had gotten pretty good at decorating cakes. The entire time, Brett just listened, smiled, and ate his lunch. He had forgotten how much he loved hearing May tell stories when she was excited. Eventually, he took his turn, telling May all about the new inventory system he was using at Wellsco, and how one of his deliveries never made it to the store because the semi had been hit by a train, splattering cream of mushroom soup all over the railroad crossing outside of town. He talked about how his parents were doing well, and how he was trying to save up to purchase a house in St. Farr. When they had both finished their lunches, Brett looked at his watch. "I need to get back to the shop," he said, stretching his arms high in the air. "This was nice." It was. As it seemed to always happen with Brett and May, one lunch turned to two. Lunches turned to dinners. Dinners turned to dates. Before either of them knew it, they were a couple once again. The old-timers would never admit it, but seeing their love bloom in rebirth was one of the greatest things they'd seen in St. Farr this decade.